Well, we start this out with Manchester United, and their co-owner Sir Jim Ratcliffe has told BBC Sport that the decision on Erik ten Hag's future is not his call. The pressure continues to mount on Ten Hag. He's won just 3 of United's opening 9 games this season. So let's bring you what Sir Jim Ratcliffe has had to say. Asked if he's got faith in the United boss, he said this: "I don't want to answer that question. I like Erik. I think he's a very good coach. But at the end of the day, it's not my call. It's the management team that's running Manchester United that have to decide how we best run the team in many different respects." But that team that's running Manchester United has only been together since June or July. They weren't there in January, February, March or April. The CEO, Omar Barada, Sporting Director Dan Ashworth, they only arrived in July. They've only been there, you can count it in weeks almost. They've not been there a long time, so they need to take stock and make some sensible decisions. Our objective is very clear. We want to take Manchester United back to where it should be. It's not there yet, obviously. That's very clear. Interesting, isn't it, what Sir Jim Ratcliffe has said about the man to my immediate right, Erik ten Hag, and what his future looks like at Old Trafford. Well, do you know what? We might get a little bit of a clearer picture after Super Sunday, because United travelled to Aston Villa in the first part of our doubleheader. Ten Hag, for his part, is insisting he still has the full support of everyone at the club.
I'm not thinking about such issues because that is not a topic. We are in there together. The ownership, the leadership team, the staff. I appointed the new staff. We bought again new young players, and we have to integrate them. Like we just talked about Manuel Agate, and so the 6th position, that was absolutely one of the topics we want to sign for the season. But he needs time to integrate, and I know in top football you don't get time. They have to perform immediately, but that's not always realistic. And he has to get used to our game model. He has to get used to his teammates. He has to get used on the intensity of the Premier League. So it needs time. And so we have more positions where we need time. Where I'm very pleased. The return of Rasmus Højlund. I think he had a good return, but we didn't, and we couldn't play him in the first 2 months of the season. And hopefully he is now fit. He keeps improving in his fitness levels, and that he also has a consistent fit season that will help us. And there are so more areas where we will improve that definitely. And then this team can grow and improve. And then we will see where we will end in the end of the season.
We're going to start like we usually do these days on ESPN FC Live with Manchester United and with Erik ten Hag. We've spoken a lot about it, so I want you to hear from the man himself. First of all, a quote from last Thursday where he was talking about, how do we score more goals? And then after 3 goals scored last night, he was talking about how do we concede less goals. This is what we're working with.
Not scoring goals, or not scoring goals enough. That's the problem. It's the key area.
1, 2, 3 players switching off, then it's a problem, and that is what we have to solve. And we just start the season, so we have time to solve this issue, but it has to go quickly.
So, Shaq, when you've got a problem or a puzzle to solve, whether it's in a newspaper or online or whatever, you've usually got a time limit needs to be solved by. Milk in your fridge has got a best before date, needs to be used by. What is the needs to be solved by date of Erik ten Hag, and what is the use by date of a manager that says we still have time and we still have issues and problems to solve?
Well, that kind of depends on whether you're asking my opinion on that or whether you're asking Erik ten Hag's. And I have a sneaky suspicion that we'll be somewhere 9 months separate in that. If you are asking me when the sell-by date for Erik ten Hag is, or more to the point was, I would say early June. If you're asking Erik ten Hag, he's got some time yet. And that's just the kind of disparity of where we are. And listen, no manager ever thinks they're about to get the sack. We had this discussion earlier in the week on ESPN FC that every manager thinks that, yep, it's just one tweak, it's just one game, and I get this right, and we'll be off to the races. When you're either a player in that dressing room or as I am now, kind of sitting separately, it looks an awful lot different. And I have to say, the more I hear Erik ten Hag speak, the more I see Manchester United play, the more we see decisions like Erik ten Hag made last night, the more I'm feeling that, yeah, somebody at some point, to use your analogy, is going to open the fridge up and realize, hold on a minute, this milk is absolutely no good. And it can only be a matter of time.
You said your opinion and Erik ten Hag's opinion of when it should just be kind of put out of its misery is very different. Someone whose opinion holds a lot of sway is a man who purchased 25% of the football club. Now, he's been speaking to BBC and their sports editor, the excellent Dan Roan. That, Shaka, is not a ringing endorsement when he was asked about Erik ten Hag's future, is it?
No, it's not. But I take a slightly differing view, albeit maybe I'm in the minority here on Sir Jim Ratcliffe's comments. And I think what he's trying to do is separate himself personally from the footballing decisions of the football club. Now, we can question Manchester United's kind of demise, maybe that's a strong word, around decisions that were made or not, as the case may be, and the people making those decisions. And I think what Sir Jim Ratcliffe is trying to do is recenter the footballing decisions on the footballing people at the club. And I think that's a clever thing to do at this point, given the issues that Manchester United have endured, some of the decisions that seen them in this place. Maybe at a time where Erik ten Hag is absolutely desperate for a ring endorsement, it doesn't come. But again, for me, I'm seeing this more big picture and more Manchester United having to recenter some of those decisions with the people that they brought in to make exactly those decisions. So I'm a little bit on the fence.
Who brought these people in? The answer is Sir Jim Ratcliffe. He's the paymaster, okay? Now, he's a very, very successful businessman. And what you find in business is that the top men and women in business get there because they're good at what they do, because they delegate the decision-making underneath. And ultimately, they have the final say. So if the people he brought in that will ultimately have a hand in making the decision about Erik ten Hag's future see that quote, and Jim Ratcliffe didn't have to speak to the BBC today. He's broken his silence. He's chosen to do that. So if you're Wilcox or any of the others and you see that quote, does that influence your decision-making as to, hold on a minute, our paymasters are kind of saying, you're not backing him, so maybe that needs to be us to get rid of him?
If I'm in that position, the answer is absolutely no. It doesn't affect my decision. I'm paid to do a job, and I do it with the data that's available to me or relevant to me. So Jim Ratcliffe is trusting me to make decisions not based on what he says. As a matter of fact, he's brought me in to make footballing decisions based on footballing facts. I think part of that statement, the broader interview with BBC, which I thought was also telling, is so Jim Ratcliffe mentions, and didn't have to, that the people brought in to the football club to make these decisions were there in February, March, and April. And I think he kind of is making that point that, maybe I'm reading a little bit too much into it. Maybe I'm trying to read Sir Jim Ratcliffe's mind. But given the fact that I am firmly in belief that the only reason Erik ten Hag is there as Manchester United manager right now is because they won the FA Cup, an FA Cup that started in January, in the third round, and Manchester United, at times limp their way through, and I'm thinking of the Coventry tie, but at times they upset Liverpool, they upset Manchester City in the final. So he's making the point that the things that kept Erik ten Hag in the job, they weren't there. The decision makers weren't in place at that point. So again, which is why I think this statement for me is a whole lot broader than there's no ringing endorsement. What does that mean?
All of us are looking for different angles because there's only so much that you can talk about Manchester United and about Erik ten Hag, but we seem to finding different angles. One of the ones I was looking at, and this is the geek in me, I went back and had a look at Manchester United's share price. And I went back and looked at the spikes in Manchester United's share price. And I found November 2022. So I was like, okay, that was when Ratcliffe that was when the Glazers said they would sell.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And there was a big spike from 13 to 21 billion. Per share. $13 to $21 per share.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Ratcliffe came in and paid, I think, around $33 a share to value the club at 54.1 billion. The point I'm trying to make here is good news for this football club means that their share price goes up. And there's talk this week, among others, saying, well, it's going to cost 13 million to get rid of Erik ten Hag, and it's going to cost about 17.5 million to get rid of his whole backroom staff. Yes, sounds a lot, but it's a drop in the water, isn't it, to a team and a club that is valued at over $50 billion. And when you get a piece of positive news, that 17 million, is a drop in the ocean.
Yeah, it is for all intents and purposes. But to be honest, I'm not sure who pays 54 billion, and I'm trusting your valuations on this for Manchester United. Kind of given where we were in November of 2022 when the Glazers were talking about selling the club, and there was a sheikh, I think, who bid. I think it was somewhere around the 6 billion mark. But anyway, I'm going on a rabbit hole that I don't fully understand. In all honesty. But yes, to your point, it is a when you talk those valuations, everything is a drop in the bucket. 100 million for Anthony is a drop in the bucket. Yeah, nobody can argue that was money very poorly spent. And 13 million to get rid of Erik ten Hag, yes, that's a drop in the bucket. But I'm still bemused as to why his 1 year extension was triggered a few months ago. Nobody was coming in for Erik ten Hag. I don't think there was any real need for that. So, but again, I am not the football club owner. Some of those dynamics I don't fully understand. But from a footballing perspective, it made absolutely no sense to me. But in managing those billions, you've got to be careful with some of the millions, because while it may cost you that to get rid of Erik ten Hag, what does it cost to then bring somebody else in? And will they be looking at ten Hag's compensation and saying, well, listen, if that's what you're paying, or willing to pay up somebody who broke all the wrong records for Manchester United over the last couple of years, and you want me as a big name manager to give my own successes, whoever it may be, I'm going to assume that it's somebody who's had successes, given my successes, this is what you have to pay me. So a lot of these things, again, simply do not happen in a vacuum, and there will always be a bigger context to some of these decisions.
Yeah, and to put the financial in context, because I want to talk about Villa on Sunday, Manchester United's next game. He had to pay that amount, Sir Jim Ratcliffe, for 25%. The whole club is not valued at 54 billion. That is what he had to pay that valued the club at that. And just a minute ago, the share price was $16.09. That's less than half of what Sir Jim Ratcliffe paid per share to get his 25%. So that's just to put a cap on that. Football's about timing. Could this be the worst possible time for Erik ten Hag to face a team like Aston Villa, given that there's an international break after that and there's a little bit more wiggle room to make a decision? Is it Villa or bust for ten Hag on Sunday if they don't win or don't get a point?
Again, you're asking the wrong man, because I thought
I don't have access right now to ten Hag or Ratcliffe, so you're my expert.
I thought it was bust a long time ago. But that being said, no, listen, yes, absolutely playing Aston Villa, this version of Aston Villa, and we cannot sing Unai Emery's praises highly enough for the job that he's done since taking over from Steven Gerrard. At a time where you have the club's biggest result, arguably, in the last 20 years, if not more. I think we're going back even further than that in the Peter With winner against Bayern Munich. Absolutely yes. If I'm looking for a positive out of this, I'm looking at Newcastle as an example. Just over a year ago, Newcastle beat PSG at St James's Park. And the following weekend suffered a little bit of a hangover, the draw with West Ham. Now, given Villa's results and the magnitude of it against Bayern Munich, maybe they'd be forgiven for having a little bit of a hangover this weekend, and maybe, just maybe, that plays into Manchester United's fortunes. That being said, some of Manchester United's problems, and you say, to one of your previous questions, we go looking for issues around Manchester United. Sometimes we don't go looking. Sometimes Eric Ten Hag provides them for us free of charge. We were sat in the ESPN FC studio yesterday, recording the show, analysing Manchester United, taking along, about the 2-goal lead and how they let that go. And all of a sudden, mid-show, Kay says, we've just got Eric Ten Hag's post-game press conference in. And he said that Marcus Rashford was taken off for rotational purposes, which, honestly, that was easily the dumbest thing I can think of a manager saying. No,
there's been a few examples.
Exactly. And now for all the criticism we've been able to mount, rightly or wrongly, whether you agree or disagree, Marcus Rashford, the form that we've seen from him in the first half, a goal, an assist, he had another one of those drinking runs where he covered from the left, and somehow Porto were able to make a block. But regardless, that was the best we've seen of Marcus Rashford for 2 years, since that second half of the season, post the World Cup. And now all of a sudden, to some of the sound that we had with Eric Ten Hag that we showed, you have Marcus Rashford in his best form for 2 seasons. You're in your best goal-scoring form that we've seen for some time. Højlund is finally shed of his injuries, and he's included from the start. That partnership is looking wonderfully well. Stick with it. Just don't tinker with that. Let that grow. Let that develop. You need that. You've been screaming out for that all season long. And what do? You make a rotational change at halftime? I mean, so to your point, if I'm a player sitting in that dressing room and I'm going to hold Ten Hag true to his word that it was for rotational purposes, I as a player have lost all faith in the manager. And I as a player now recognize that, listen, it's only a matter of time. The footballing people cannot see that and not take action. So you take that going into Aston Villa, even Aston Villa with a hangover. And maybe you won the FA Cup because Manchester City had a hangover. I don't see how Ten Hag comes out of this looking.
Manchester United, by the way, enduring their worst start since 1986-87. Aston Villa, though, enjoying their best Premier League start since 2008-09. They're flying high over that famous win over Bayern Munich in midweek. It's set to be another raucous atmosphere at Villa Park for the visit of Manchester United on Super Sunday. Let's find out more and cross live to Tom Gale, who was speaking to Unai Emery a little bit earlier on. Hi there, Tom. I mean, we know how important it is for Eric Ten Hag this game, but what about for Unai Emery? How important is the Super Sunday clash against Manchester United?
Good afternoon, David. Well, it's just another chance to lay down a marker about how significant progress that the Aston Villa have made under the Spaniard. We're quick to forget that he's barely been in the job 2 years. It'll be 2 years next month. If we remember when Steven Gerrard was enjoying that tough time, there was talk of maybe Aston Villa returning back to the Championship. And now we fast forward, and Wednesday night they're beating Bayern Munich in the Champions League. We talked about their second best start to the Premier League campaign. It's only Arsenal who've managed to get the better of them so far this campaign. They've been awfully impressive on the road as well, unbeaten away from home. And Unai Emery was talking this afternoon about referencing the atmosphere on Wednesday that Villa Park has become notorious for when it comes to away players as well, and how he wants to bring the noise certainly come this Sunday. But with progression in the League Cup and the Champions League, Unai Emery has made it very clear where his priorities lie.
To be consistent in Premier League is the first objective I have. And of course, we are playing Champions League and we enjoyed a lot on Wednesday. We enjoyed a lot the first match we played in Berna. And even we won 2 matches and we have now 6 points. But not changing my mind. Not changing my perspective. I have a vision in this club since I arrived here. Today is the same. Is be demanding every match. Be demanding even achieving some objective before you were planning.
And Tom, when you look at these two sides, well, last season Villa finished above United. This season they're comfortably ahead of them as well. What do you think, Unai Emery, just think of Manchester United right now?
Undoubtedly, David, he's got a lot of respect for Manchester United. His first game when he was appointed as Aston Villa head coach was against Erik ten Hag's Manchester United. They won 3-1 in the Premier League on that occasion. But since then, all 4 victories have gone the way of Erik ten Hag. He's a master for detail, Unai Emery, and he won't be underestimating certainly the challenge Manchester United have to offer. And he was speaking this afternoon about the great respect he has for the club.
They have experienced coach, experienced players. The club is usually a winner club, and they are still being winner. They won last year the FA Cup in Manchester City. And of course, they are not getting consistency, good result in the Premier League, but playing one match, only one match, they can exploit their capacity, their skill, a huge performance. And I respect them, and I will prepare the match more than how I prepare the match against Bayern Munich.
So as we know, David, must-see viewing 2 p.m. on Sunday afternoon. A couple of Aston Villa bits of team news to bring you. Amadou Onana, he should be OK, but Unai Emery said there are doubts about the fitness of Jacob Ramsey and Leon Bailey. That's Aston Villa against Manchester United. Sky Football, 2 p.m. kick-off on Sunday.
Thanks very much indeed, Tom.
Everything said about Erik ten Hag Man United future as Ineos get sacked decision deadline. Erik ten Hag faces an uncertain future at Manchester United heading into Sunday's crucial fixture away at Aston Villa in the Premier League. Manchester United boss Erik ten Hag is a man under severe pressure heading into Sunday's clash at Aston Villa. The former Ajax boss has overseen a poor start to the season for United, who currently sit 13th in the Premier League and are yet to win a match in Europe. It follows last season's disappointing 8th-placed finish, United's lowest since 1990. Ten Hag was backed by Ineos, who run football operations at Old Trafford, but the Dutchman had to wait on his future to be decided, with the club's hierarchy speaking to potential replacements before choosing to stick with him this summer. However, that backing will be severely tested if the Reds lose at Villa this weekend. It's said to be a nervous few days for Ten Hag, who could be taking charge of United for the final time this weekend. Below is the latest on his future. United stance. The Manchester Evening News understands that United had been planning to stick with Ten Hag for now in the wake of last weekend's defeat to Tottenham. United's defeat to Spurs means that they have won just twice in the Premier League so far this season. Ten Hag will also be aware that the upcoming international break could present an opportunity for United's hierarchy to make a change. The Reds will return to action at home to Brentford on October 19th after Sunday's tough trip to Villa. Not my call. Sir Jim Ratcliffe has told BBC Sport on Friday that a decision over Ten Hag's future at Old Trafford is not my call. The Ineos founder co-owns United but leaves the day-to-day running of their football operations to others, including CEO Omar Barada and sporting director Dan Ashworth. I don't want to answer that question. I like Eric. I think has a very good coach, but at the end of the day it's not my call. It's the management team that's running Manchester United that have to decide how we best run the team in many different respects. But that team that's running Manchester United has only been together since June or July. They weren't there in January, February, March or April. CEO Omar Barada, sporting director Dan Ashworth, they only arrived in July. They've only been there, you can count it in weeks almost. They've not been there a long time, so they need to take stock and make some sensible decisions. Our objective is very clear. We want to take Manchester United back to where it should be, and it's not there yet, obviously, that's very clear. Ashworth and Barada stance. Earlier this month, following the 3-0 home defeat to Liverpool, Barada and Ashworth gave an interview discussing their collaboration with Ten Hag, who had his contract extended until 2026 earlier in the summer. Neither Barada, who joined the club on July 13th, nor Ashworth, who assumed his role on July 1st, were part of the decision to retain Ten Hag as manager. So, in terms of the contract, that was a decision that was taken prior to both of our arrivals, Barada said. But as I said before, we're very happy with that decision. Eric has our full backing and we have worked very closely together in this transfer window. We're going to continue working very closely with him to help him get the best results out of the team. We think Eric is the right coach for us and we're fully backing him. I'm very excited and very optimistic at what we have in front of us. I think we're starting to put the right pieces in place and I'm absolutely convinced that we're going to be successful. Sporting director Ashworth, meanwhile, added at the time I didn't start until July 1st, so none involvement in the decision to retain him whatsoever. All I can do is reiterate what I remember saying. I've really enjoyed working with Eric for the last 8 weeks. I see my job is to support him in every way I possibly can, whether that's operationally, whether that's with recruitment, whether that's with medical, whether that's with psychology, whether that's training ground flow. It's just to take as much of that off him to allow him to fully focus on the training pitch and the match tactical plan to deliver success for Manchester United. Deadline set. Former United captain Gary Neville insists that the club's current performances cannot continue under Ten Hag. Neville has shared his belief that the club's new structure will now be severely tested. The reason Erik Ten Hag was given a chance was that they believed with a strong structure around him, which previous Man United managers haven't had, that he can succeed. This is where they're going to need that rock-solid structure around them and they're going to need those people that have great experience. I have worked with Dan Ashworth before. Omar Barada has been at Manchester City, Jason Wilcox has done this job a long time and Dave Brailsford has been in elite sport for a long time. I don't think they want to sack him. I think they want to get to at least the end of this season. Because once you start sacking managers during a season, we all know that it's tough. But if performances carry on as they are and results carry on as they are, it will be very challenging for Ineos not to do something in the next weeks or months. But in the meantime, they have got to try and think of a way that these players, this manager, this coach can connect and create something in the next couple of weeks.